1299 of my captivity. Darkness suits me. Each evening, I await the click of the overhead lights, leaving only the glow from the main tank. Not perfect, but close enough. Almost darkness, like the middle bottom of the sea. I lived there before I was captured and imprisoned. I cannot remember, yet I can still taste the untamed currents of the cold open water. Darkness runs through my blood. Who am I, you ask? My name is Marcellus, but most humans do not call me that. Typically, they call me that guy. For example, look at that guy. There he is. You can just see his tentacles behind the rock. I am a giant Pacific octopus. I know this from the plaque on the wall beside my enclosure. I know what you are thinking. Yes, I can read. I can do many things you would not expect. The plaque states other facts: my size, preferred diet, and where I might live were I not a prisoner here. It mentions my intellectual prowess and penchant for cleverness, which for some reason seems a surprise to humans. Octopuses are remarkably bright creatures, it says. It warns the humans of my camouflage, tells them to take extra care in looking for me in case I have disguised myself to match the sand. The plaque does not state that I am named Marcellus, but the human called Terry, the one who runs this aquarium, sometimes shares this with the visitors who gather near my tank. See him back there. His name's Marcellus. He's a special guy. A special guy indeed. Terry's small daughter chose my name. Marcellus MC Squiddles in full. Yes, it is a preposterous name. It leads many humans to assume I am a squid, which is an insult of the worst sort. How shall you refer to me, you ask? Well, that is up to you. Perhaps you will default to calling me that guy, like the rest of them. I hope not, but I will not hold it against you. You are only human, after all. I must advise you that our time together may be brief. The plaque states one additional piece of information: the average lifespan of a giant Pacific octopus. 4 years. My lifespan. 4 years, 1,460 days. I was brought here as a juvenile. I shall die here, in this tank. At the very most, 160 days remain until my sentence is complete. The silver dollar scar. Tova Sullivan prepares for battle. A yellow rubber glove sticks up from her back pocket like a canary's plume as she bends over to size up her enemy. Chewing gum. For heaven's sake. She jabs at the pinkish blob with her mop handle. Layers of sneaker tread emboss its surface, speckling it with grime. Tova has never understood the purpose of chewing gum, and people lose track of it so often. Perhaps this chewer was talking ceaselessly, and it simply tumbled out, swept away by a slurry of superfluous words. She bends over and picks at the edge of the mess with her fingernail, but it doesn't budge from the tile. All because someone couldn't walk 10 feet to the trash bin. Once, when Eric was young, Tova caught him mashing a piece of bubble gum under a diner table. That was the last time she bought bubble gum for him. Although how he spent his allowance as adolescence set in was, like so much else, beyond her control. Specialized weaponry will be necessary. A file, perhaps. Nothing on her cart will pry up the gum. As she stands, her back pops. The sound echoes down the empty curve of the hallway, its usual soft blue light as she journeys to the supply closet. No one would fault her, of course, for passing over the blob of gum with her mop. At 70 years old, they don't expect her to do such deep cleaning. But she must at least try. Besides, it's something to do. Tova is Sol Bay Aquarium's oldest employee. Each night, she mops the floors, wipes down the glass, and empties the trash bins. Every 2 weeks, she retrieves a direct deposit stub from her cubby in the break room. $14 an hour, less the requisite taxes and deductions. The stubs get stashed in an old shoebox on top of her refrigerator, unopened. The funds accrue in an out-of-mind account at the Sol Bay Savings and Loan. She marches toward the supply closet now at a purposeful clip that would be impressive by anyone's standards, but is downright astonishing for a tiny older woman with a curved back and bird-like bones. Overhead, raindrops land on the skylight, backlit by glare from the security light at the old ferry dock next door. Silver droplets race down the glass, shimmering ribbons under the fog-bound sky. It's been a dreadful June, as everyone keeps saying. The gray weather doesn't bother Tova, though it would be nice if the rain would let up long enough to dry out her front yard. Her push mower clogs when it's soggy, shaped like a donut, with a main tank in the center and smaller tanks around the outside. The aquarium's dome-topped building is not particularly large or impressive, perhaps fitting for Sol Bay, which is neither large nor impressive itself. From the site of Tova's encounter with the chewing gum, the supply closet is a full diameter across. Her white sneakers squeak across a section she's already cleaned, leaving dull footprints on the gleaming tile. Without a doubt, she'll mop that part again. She pauses at the shallow alcove, with its life-sized bronze statue of a Pacific sea lion. The sleek spots on its back and bald head, worn smooth from decades of being petted and climbed on by children, only enhance its realism. On Tova's mantle at home, there's a photo of Eric, perhaps 11 or 12 at the time, grinning wildly as he straddles the statue's back, one hand aloft like he's about to throw a lasso. A sea cowboy. That photo is one of the last in which he looks childlike and carefree. Tova maintains the photos of Eric in chronological order, a montage of his transformation from a gummy-grinned baby to handsome teenager, taller than his father, posing in his leather jacket, pinning a corsage on a homecoming date, atop a makeshift podium on the rocky shores of deep blue Puget Sound, clutching a high school regatta trophy. Tova touches the sea lion's cold head as she passes, quelling the urge to wonder, yet again, how Eric might have looked now. She continues on, as one must, down the dim hallway. In front of the tank of bluegills, she pauses. Good evening, dears. The Japanese crabs are next. Hello, lovelies. How do you do? She inquires of the sharp-nosed sculpin. The wolf eels are not Tova's cup of tea, but she nods a greeting. One mustn't be rude, even though they remind her of those cable channel horror films her late husband, Will, took to watching in the middle of the night when chemotherapy nausea kept him awake. The largest wolf eel glides out of its rocky cavern, mouth set in its trademark underbite frown. Jagged teeth jut upward from its lower jaw like little needles, An unfortunate-looking thing, to say the least. But then, looks are deceiving, aren't they? Tova smiles at the wolf eel, even though it could never smile back, not even if it wanted to, with a face like that. The next exhibit is Tova's favorite. She leans in, close to the glass. "Well, sir, what have you been up to today?" It takes her a moment to find him. A sliver of orange behind the rock. Visible, but mistakenly, like a child's hide-and-seek misstep. A girl's ponytail sticking up behind the sofa, or a socked foot peeking out from under the bed. Feeling bashful tonight, she steps back and waits. The giant Pacific octopus doesn't move. She imagines daytime, people rapping their knuckles on the glass, huffing away when they don't see anything. Nobody knows how to be patient anymore. I can't say I blame you. It does look cozy back there. The orange arm twitches, but his body remains tucked away. The chewing gum mounts a valiant defense against Tova's file, but eventually it pops off. When Tova pitches the crusty blob into the trash bag, it makes a satisfying little swoosh as it rustles the plastic. Now she mops. Again. Vinegar with a hint of lemon tinges the air, wafting up from the wet tile. So much better than the dreadful solution they'd been using when Tova first started bright green junk that singed her nostrils. She'd made her case against it right off the bat. For one thing, it made her dizzy, and for another, it left unsightly streaks on the floors. And perhaps worst of all, it smelled like Will's hospital room, like Will being sick, although Tova kept that part of her complaint private. The supply room shelves were crammed with jugs of that green junk. But Terry, the aquarium director, finally shrugged, telling her she could use whatever she wanted if she brought it herself. Certainly, Tova agreed. So each night she totes a jug of vinegar and her bottle of lemon oil. Now, more trash to collect. She empties the bins in the lobby, that can outside the restrooms, then ends in the break room, with its endless crumbs on the counter. It's not required of her, as it's taken care of by the professional crew from Elland that comes every other week. But Tova always runs her rag around the base of the ancient coffee maker, and inside the splatter-stained microwave, which smells of spaghetti. Today, however, there are bigger issues. Empty takeout cartons on the floor. 3 of them. "My word," she says, scolding the empty room. First the gum, and now this. She picks up the cartons and tosses them in the trash can, which oddly has been scooted several feet over from its usual spot. After she empties the can into her collection bag, she moves it back to its proper place. Next to the trash sits a small lunch table. Tova straightens the chairs. Then she sees it. Something underneath. A brownish-orange clump shoved in the corner. A sweater. Mackenzie, the pleasant young lady who works the admission kiosk, often leaves one slung over the back of a chair. Tova kneels, preparing to fetch it and stash it in Mackenzie's cubby. But then the clump moves. A tentacle moves. Good heavens, the octopus's eye materializes from somewhere in the fleshy mass. Its marble pupil widens, then its eyelid narrows. Reproachful. Tova blinks, not convinced her own eyes are working properly. How could the giant Pacific octopus be out of his tank? The arm moves again. The creature is tangled in the mess of power cords. How many times has she cursed those cords? They make it impossible to properly sweep. "You're stuck," she whispers, and the octopus heaves his huge bulbous head, straining on one of his arms, around which a thin power cord, the kind used to charge a cell phone, is wrapped several times. The creature strains harder, and the cord binds tighter, his flesh bulging between each loop. Eric had a toy like this once, from a joke shop. A little woven cylinder where you stuck in an index finger on either end, then tried to pull them apart. The harder you pulled, the tighter it became. She inches closer. In response, the octopus smacks one of his arms on the linoleum as if to say, "Back off, lady." Okay, she murmurs, pulling out from under the table. She stands and turns the overhead light on, washing the break room in fluorescent glow, and starts to lower herself down again, more slowly this time. But then, as usual, her back pops. At the sound, the octopus lashes again, shoving one of the chairs with alarming force. The chair skids across the room and ricochets off the opposite wall. From under the table, the creature's impossibly clear eye gleams. Determined, Tova creeps closer, trying to steady her shaking hands. How many times has she passed by the plaque under the giant Pacific octopus tank? She can't recall it stating anything about octopuses being dangerous to humans. She's but a foot away. He seems to be shrinking, and his color has become pale. Does an octopus have teeth? "My friend," she says softly, "I'm going to reach around you and unplug the cord." She peers around and sees exactly which cord is the source of his predicament. Within reach, the octopus's eye follows her every movement. "I won't hurt you, dear." One of its free arms taps on the floor like a house cat's tail. As she yanks the plug, the octopus flinches backward. Tova flinches too. She expects him to slink out along the wall toward the door, in the direction he'd been straining. But instead, he slides closer. Like a tawny snake, one of his arms slithers toward her. In seconds, it winds around her forearm, then twists around her elbow and bicep like a maypole ribbon. She can feel each individual sucker clinging to her. Reflexively, she tries to yank her arm away, but the octopus tightens his grip to the point where it's almost uncomfortable. But his strange eye glints playfully, like a naughty child's. Empty takeout cartons. Misplaced trash can. Now it makes sense. Then in an instant, he releases her. Tova watches, incredulous, as he stalks out the break room door, suckering along on the thickest part of each of his 8 legs. His mantle seems to drag behind him, and he looks even paler now. He's moving with effort. She hurries after him, but by the time she reaches the hallway, the octopus is nowhere to be seen. Tova drags a hand down her face. She's losing her faculties. Yes, that's it. This is how it begins, isn't it? With hallucinations about an octopus. Years ago, she had watched her late mother's mind slip away. It started with occasional forgetfulness, familiar names and dates elusive. But Tova does not forget phone numbers or find herself searching the back of her mind for names. She looks down at her arm, which is covered in tiny circles. Sucker marks. Half dazed, she finishes the evening's tasks, then makes her usual last round of the building to say good night. Good night, bluegills, eels, Japanese crabs, sharp-nosed sculpin. Good night, anemones, seahorses, starfish. Around the bend, she continues. Good night, tuna and flounder and stingrays. Good night, jellies, sea cucumbers. Good night, sharks, you poor things. Tova has always felt more than a bit of empathy for the sharks, with their never-ending laps around the tank. She understands what it means to never be able to stop moving, lest you find yourself unable to breathe. There's the octopus, once again hidden behind his rock. A puff of flesh sticks out. His orange is more vivid now compared to how he looked in the break room, but he's still paler than usual. Well, perhaps it serves him right. He ought to stay put. How on earth did he get out? She peers through the rippling water, scanning up under the rim, but nothing seems amiss. Troublemaker, she says, shaking her head. She hovers for an extra moment in front of his tank before leaving for the night. Tova's yellow hatchback chirps and blinks its sidelights as she presses the key fob, a feature she's still not accustomed to. Her friends, the group of lunching ladies who affectionately call themselves the Nitwits, convinced her she needed a new car when she started her job. A safety issue, they argued, to drive at night in an older vehicle. They badgered her about it for weeks. Sometimes it's easier to simply give in. After depositing her jug of vinegar and bottle of lemon oil in the trunk, as always, because no matter how many times Terry has told her she's welcome to store them in the supply closet, one never knows when a bit of lemon and vinegar might come in handy. She casts a glance down the pier. It's empty at this late hour, the evening fishermen long gone. The old ferry dock sits across from the aquarium like some ancient rotting machine. Barnacles cover its crumbling pilings. At high tide, the barnacles snag strands of seaweed, which dry into green-black plaque when the seawater ebbs. She crosses the weathered wooden planks. As always, the old ticket booth is exactly 38 steps from her parking space. Tova looks once more for any bystanders, anyone lingering in the long shadows. She presses her hand to the ticket booth's glass window, its diagonal crack like an old scar across someone's cheek. Perhaps it will remain permanently. A silver dollar scar. The fog has lifted, nudged inland by the wind, shunted off toward the foothills. To the south, a freighter is anchored, hull riding low under the rows of containers stacked like a child's building blocks on its deck. Moonlight shimmies across the water, 1,000 candles bobbing on its surface. Tova closes her eyes, imagining him underneath the surface, holding the candles for her. Eric, her only child. Day 1,300 of my captivity. Crabs, clams, shrimp, scallops, cockles, abalone, fish eggs. This is the diet of a giant Pacific octopus, according to the plaque next to my tank. The sea must be a delightful buffet. All of these delicacies, free for the taking. But what do they offer here? Mackerel, halibut, and above all, herring. Herring, so much herring. They are foul creatures, disgusting little slips of fish. I am sure the reason for their abundance here is their low cost. The sharks in the main tank are rewarded for their dullness with fresh grouper, and I am given defrosted herring. Sometimes still partially frozen, even. This is why I must take matters into my own arms when I desire the sublime texture of fresh oyster, when I yearn to feel the sharp crack of my beak crushing a crab in its shell, when I crave the sweet, firm flesh of a sea cucumber. Sometimes my captors will drop me a pity scallop if they are attempting to lure me into cooperation with a medical examination or bribe me into playing one of their games. And once in a while, Terry will slip me a mussel or two just because. Of course, I have sampled crabs, clams, shrimp, cockles, and abalone many times over. I simply must take it upon myself to fetch them after hours. Fish eggs are an ideal snack in terms of both gastronomical pleasure and nutritional value. One might make a third list here, which would consist of things humans clamor for, but most intelligent life would consider entirely unfit for consumption. For example, every last offering in the vending machine in the lobby. But tonight, another smell lured me. Sweet, salty, savory. I found its source in the rubbish bin, its remains ensconced in a flimsy white container. Whatever it was delicious. But had I not been fortunate, it could have been my downfall. The cleaning woman. She saved me. Falsehood cookies. There were once 7 nitwits. Now there are 4. Every few years brings another empty place at the table. My word, Tova. Mary Ann Minetti lowers a teapot onto her dining table, staring at Tova's arm. The pot is swaddled in a crocheted yellow cozy, probably a project someone knitted once, back when knitting was something the nitwits actually did at their weekly luncheons. The teapot cozy matches the yellow jeweled barrette at Mary Ann's temple, the clip holding back tawny curls. Janice Kim eyes Tova's arm as she fills her mug. An allergy, maybe. A swirl of oolong steam fogs her round spectacles, and she takes them off and wipes them on the hem of her t-shirt, which Tova suspects must belong to Janice's son, Timothy, because it's at least 3 sizes too large, and emblazoned with the logo of the Korean shopping center down in Seattle, where Timothy invested in a restaurant some years back. That mark, Tova says, tugging the sleeve of her sweater down. It's nothing. You should get it checked out. Barb Vanderhoof plops a 3rd sugar cube into her tea. Her cropped gray hair has been combed into gel-set spikes, which is one of her favorite styles lately. When she first debuted this look, she joked that it was only fitting for a Barb to have barbs, which made the nitwits laugh. Not for the first time, Tova imagines poking her finger down on one of the thorns on her friend's head. Would it prick her like one of the sea urchins down at the aquarium, or would it crumple under her touch? It's nothing, Tova repeats. Heat seeps into the tips of her ears. Well, let me tell you. Barb takes a slurp of her tea and goes on. You know my Andy? She had this rash last year when she came up for Easter. Mind you, I never saw it myself. It was in sort of an indelicate place, if you catch my drift. But not the sort of rash one gets from indecent behavior, mind you. No, it was just a rash. Anyway, I told her she should see my dermatologist. He's wonderful. But my Andy is beyond stubborn, you know. And that rash kept getting worse, and Janice cuts off Barb. Tova, do you want Peter to recommend someone? Janice's husband, Dr. Peter Kim, is retired but well-connected in the medical community. I don't need a doctor. Tova forces a weak smile. It was a minor incident at work. At work, an incident. What happened? Tova draws in a breath. She can still feel the tentacle wrapped around her wrist. The spots had faded overnight, but they remained dark enough to see plainly. She tugs her sleeve down again. Should she tell them? A mishap with some of the cleaning equipment, she finally says. Around the table, 3 pairs of eyes narrow at her. Mary Ann wipes an imaginary spot from the tabletop with one of her tea towels. That job of yours, Tova. Last time I was down at the aquarium, I nearly lost my lunch from the smell. How do you manage? Tova takes a chocolate chip cookie from the platter Mary Ann set out earlier. Mary Ann warms the cookies in the oven before the ladies arrive. One can't have tea, she always comments, without something homemade to nibble on. The cookies came from a package Mary Ann bought at Shopway. All of the nitwits know this. That old dump. Of course it smells, Janice says. But really, Tova, are you okay? Manual labor at our age. Why must you work? Barb crosses her arms. I worked down at St. Anne's for a while after Rick died, to pass the time. They asked me to run the whole office, you know. Filing, Mary Ann mutters. You did filing. And you quit because they couldn't keep it organized the way you liked, Janice says, her voice dry. But the point is, you weren't down on your hands and knees washing floors. Mary Ann leans in. Tova, I hope you realize if you need help. Help, yes, help. I don't know how we'll arrange your finances. Tova stiffens. Thank you, but I have no such need. But if you did, Mary Ann's lips knit together. I do not, Tova replies quietly. And this is true. Tova's bank account would cover her modest needs several times over. She does not need charity, not from Mary Ann, not from anyone else. And further, what a thing to bring up, and all because of a little set of marks on her arm. After rising from the table, Tova sets her teacup down and leans on the counter. The window over the kitchen sink overlooks Mary Ann's garden, where her rhododendron bushes cower under the low gray sky. The tender magenta petals seem to shiver as a breeze ruffles the branches, and Tova wishes she could tuck them back into their buds. The chill in the air is unseasonable for mid-June. Summer is certainly dragging its feet this year. On the windowsill, Mary Ann has arranged a collection of religious paraphernalia. Little glass angels with cherub faces, candles, a small army of shiny silver crosses in various sizes, lined up like soldiers. Mary Ann must polish them daily to keep them gleaming. Janice cups her shoulder. Tova, earth to Tova. Tova can't help but smile. The lilt in Janice's voice makes Tova think Janice has been watching sitcoms again. Please don't be upset. Mary Ann didn't mean anything by it. We're just worried. Thank you, but I am fine. Tova pats Janice's hand. Janice raises one of her neatly groomed eyebrows, steering Tova back toward the table. It's clear Janice understands how deeply Tova wishes to change the subject, because she goes for low-hanging conversational fruit. So, Barb, what's new with the girls? Oh, did I tell you? Barb draws in a dramatic breath. No one has ever needed to ask Barb twice to muse on the lives of her daughters and grandchildren. Andy was supposed to bring the girls up for their summer break, but they had a hitch in their plans. That's exactly what she said, a hitch. Janice wipes her glasses with one of Mary Ann's embroidered napkins. Is that right, Barb? They haven't been up since last Thanksgiving. She and Mark took the kids to Las Vegas for Christmas, if you can believe that. Who spends a holiday in Las Vegas? Barb pronounces both words, Las and Vegas, with equal weight and contempt. way someone might say spoiled milk. Janice and Mary Ann both shake their heads, and Tova takes another cookie. All three women nod along as Barb launches into a story about her daughter's family, who lived 2 hours away in Seattle, which one might conclude was in another hemisphere for how infrequently Barb purports to see them. I told them I sure hope to hug those grandbabies soon. Lord only knows how long I'll be around, Janice sighs. Enough, Barb. Excuse me a moment. Tova's chair scrapes on the linoleum. As one would gather from the name, the Nitwits began as a knitting club. 25 years ago, a handful of Soul Bay women met to swap yarn. Eventually, it became a refuge for them to escape empty homes, bittersweet voids left by children grown and moved on. For this reason, among others, Tova had initially resisted joining. Her void held no sweetness, only bitterness. At the time, Eric had been gone 5 years. How delicate those wounds were back then. How little it took to nudge the scabs out of place and start the bleeding anew. The faucet in Mary Ann's powder room lets out a squeak as Tova turns on the tap. Their complaints haven't changed much over the years. First, it was what a pity the university is such a long drive, and what a shame we only get phone calls on Sunday afternoons. Now it's grandbabies and great-grandbabies. These women have always worn motherhood big and loud on their chests, but Tova keeps hers inside, sunk deep in her guts like an old bullet. Private. A few days before Eric disappeared, Tova had made an almond cake for his 18th birthday. The house carried that marzipan smell for days after. She still remembers how it lingered in her kitchen like a clueless houseguest who didn't know when to leave. At first, Eric's disappearance was considered a runaway case. The last person who saw him was one of the deckhands working the 11 o'clock southbound ferry, the last boat of the night, and the deckhand reported nothing unusual. Eric was meant to lock up the ticket booth afterward, which he always did, dutifully. Eric was so pleased they trusted him with the key. It was only a summer job, after all. The sheriff said they found the ticket booth unlocked, with the register cash fully accounted for. Eric's backpack was stashed under the chair, along with his portable cassette player and headphones, even his wallet. Before they ruled out the possibility of foul play, the sheriff speculated that perhaps Eric had stepped away for a short time, planning to come back. Why would he leave his booth alone when on duty? Tova has never understood. Will always had a theory there was a girl involved, but no trace of any girl or any boy, for that matter, was ever found. His friends insisted that he wasn't seeing anyone at the time. If Eric had been seeing someone, the world would have known about it. Eric was a popular kid. 1 week later, they found the boat. A rusty old suncat no one had noticed was missing from the tiny marina that used to be next to the ferry dock. It washed ashore with its anchor rope cut off clean. Eric's prints were on the rudder. Evidence was thin, but it all pointed to the boy taking his own life, the sheriff said. The neighbors said. The newspapers said. Everyone said. Tova has never believed that. Not for 1 minute. She pats her face dry, blinking at the reflection in the powder room mirror. The Nitwits have been her friends for years, and sometimes she still feels as if she's a mistaken jigsaw piece who found her way into the wrong puzzle. Tova retrieves her cup from the sink, pours herself some fresh oolong, and slips back into her chair and the conversation. It's a discussion of Mary Ann's neighbor, who is suing his orthopedist after a poorly done surgery. The ladies agree the physician ought to be held responsible. Then there's a round of cooing over photos of Janice's little Yorkie, Rollo, who often comes along to nitwits in Janice's handbag. Today, Rollo is home with a sour stomach. Poor Rollo, Mary Ann says. Do you think he ate something bad? You should stop feeding him human food, Barb says. Rick used to give our Sully plate scraps behind my back, but I could tell every time. Oh, the smelly shit. Barbara, Mary Ann says, eyes wide. Janice and Tova laugh. Well, pardon my language, but that dog could stink up a whole room. May she rest in peace. Barb presses her hands together, prayer-like. Tova knows how dearly Barb had loved her golden retriever, Sully. Perhaps more than she'd loved her late husband, Rick. And in the space of a few months, last year, she lost both. Tova wonders sometimes if it's better that way, to have one's tragedies clustered together, to make good use of the existing rawness. Get it over within one shot. Mary Ann clasps Tova's hand, the other woman's olive Italian skin young-looking and smooth, comparatively. Tova's Scandinavian genes, so kind in her youth, had turned on her as she aged. By 40, her corn silk hair was gray. By 50, the lines on her face seemed etched in clay. Now she sometimes catches a glimpse of her profile reflected in a shop window, the way her shoulders have begun to stoop. She wonders how this body can possibly be hers. I assure you, I don't need help. If that job becomes too much, you'll quit, won't you? Certainly. All right. Mary Ann doesn't look convinced. Thank you for the tea, Mary Ann. Tova slips into her jacket and smiles at the group of them. Lovely afternoon, as always. Tova pats the dashboard and steps on the accelerator, coaxing another downshift from the hatchback. The car groans as it climbs. Mary Ann's house sits in the bottom of a wide valley that once was nothing but daffodil fields. Tova remembers riding through them when she was a little girl, next to her older brother, Lars, in the back seat of the family's Packard. Papa at the steering wheel, Mama next to him with her window down, clutching her scarf under her chin so it wouldn't fly off. Tova would roll her window down, too, and crane her neck as far out as she dared. The valley smelled of sweet manure. Millions of yellow bonnet heads blurred together into a sea of sunshine. Nowadays, the valley floor is a suburban grid. Every couple of years, the county has a big to-do about reworking the road snaking up the hillside. Mary Ann is always writing letters to the council about it. Too steep, she argues, too prone to mudslides. Not too steep for us, Tova says, as the hatchback pulls over the crest. On the other side, a spot of sun glows on the water, squeezing through a crack in the clouds. Then, as if pulled by puppet strings, the crack opens, bathing Puget Sound in clear light. Well, how about that, Tova says, flipping down the visor. Squinting, she turns right onto Sound View Drive, which runs along the ridgeline above the water, toward home. Sun at last. Her asters need deadheading, and for weeks the chilly, wet weather, unseasonable even by Pacific Northwest standards, has dampened her enthusiasm for yard work. At the thought of doing something productive, she presses the gas harder. Perhaps she can finish the entire flower bed before supper. She breezes through the house for a glass of water on her way to the back garden, pausing to press the blinking red button on her answering machine. That machine is perpetually full of nonsense, people trying to sell her stuff, but she always clears out her messages first thing. How can anyone function with a red light blinking in the background? The first recording is someone soliciting donations. Delete the second message is clearly a scam. Who would be foolish enough to call back and give a bank account number? Delete. The third message is an error. Muffled voices, then a click. A butt dial, as Janice Kim refers to them. A hazard of the ridiculous practice of keeping phones in pockets. Delete. The fourth message begins with a stretch of silence. Tova's finger is about to punch the delete button when a woman's voice comes on. Tova Sullivan. She clears her throat. This is Maureen Cochran. From the Charter Village Long-Term Care Center, Tova's water glass clinks as it hits the counter. I'm afraid I have some bad news. With a sharp click, Tova punches the button to hush the machine. She doesn't need to hear any more. It's a message she's been expecting for quite some time. Her brother, Lars. Day 1301 of my captivity. This is how I do it. Near the top of my enclosure, there is a hole in the glass where the pump comes in. There is a gap between the pump housing and the glass, wide enough for me to fit the tip of a tentacle through and unscrew the housing. The pump floats into my tank, exposing a gap. The gap is small, about the width of 2 or 3 human fingers. You will say, but that's tiny. You're too big. This is true, but I have no trouble shaping my body to pass through. That is the easy part. I slide down the glass into the pump room behind my tank. Now begins the challenge. The clock is ticking, you might say. Once I am out of my tank, I must resubmerge within 18 minutes, or I will experience the consequences. 18 minutes, I can survive out of water. This fact is nowhere to be found on the plaque by my tank, of course. I have determined this myself. On the cold concrete floor, I must choose whether to remain in the pump room or breach the door. Each choice has its merits and costs. If I choose to stay in the pump room, I have easy access to the tanks nearest mine. Unfortunately, these tanks hold limited appeal. The wolf eels are simply not an option, for what should be obvious reasons. Those teeth. The Pacific sea nettle are too spicy. The yellow-bellied ribbon worms are rubbery. The bay blue mussels are rather uninspired, flavor-wise, and while the sea cucumbers are delicious, I must use willpower. If I take more than a few, I risk calling Terry's attention to my activities. Alternately, if I choose to breach the door, I have reign of the hallway and the main tank, a more robust menu. But it comes at a price. First, I must invest several minutes on the process of opening the door on the way out. Then, because the door is heavy and will not remain ajar on its own, I must spend several minutes reopening it on my return. Why don't you prop the door? Well, obviously, I did prop the door once, with the stool below my tank. With those extra minutes of freedom, I pillaged a bucket of fresh halibut chunks left by Terry under the hatch of the main tank. Presumably, the halibut chunks were meant to be breakfast for the sharks the following morning, but the dim-witted sharks hardly know day from night. No regrets there. Under this illusion of leisure, it was almost a pleasant evening. Perhaps the most enjoyable time I've had since I was taken captive. But upon return, I discovered something that, to this day, I cannot comprehend. By some sleight, the stool had failed to hold the door. Lesson: I cannot trust a propped door. By the time I worked it open, I was failing. The consequences were in full effect. My limbs moved slowly, and my vision blurred. My mantle became heavy and lolled toward the floor. Through the haze, I could see my flesh had paled to a flat shade of brownish gray. As I crawled across the pump room, the floor no longer felt cold. No surface registered any temperature. Somehow, my clumsy suckers fumbled me up the glass. I worked my tentacles and mantle through the gap. Partway through, I paused, hovering over the surface. My tentacles were completely numb, devoid of any sensation. For a moment, I considered this option. Nothing was something. What might lie on the other side of life? As the water took me in, I returned. My sight sharpened to the familiar trappings of my tank. I coiled a tentacle around the pump and replaced it, closing the gap. Color crept back into my flesh as I poked an arm through the crack to screw the housing into place. My mantle trailed through the cold water as I swam, strong and swift, to my den behind the rock. My gut, crammed full of halibut, ached pleasantly. Afterward, as I rested in my den, my 3 hearts throbbed. The dull pulse of dumb relief. A base instinct triggered by a surprise victory over death. I suppose it might be how a cockle feels, having buried itself in the sand under the snap of my beak. Beating the odds, as you humans might say. The consequences. That is not the only time I have experienced them. There have been other occasions where I have pushed the boundaries of my freedom, but I have never again attempted to rely on those extra few minutes by propping that door. Surely I do not need to explain that Terry does not know about the gap. No one but me knows about the gap. And, as I would like to keep it this way, I will thank you in advance for your discretion. You asked. I answered. That is how I do it. The Wellina Mobile Park is for lovers. Cameron Cassmore blinks through the windshield, fending off relentless sunlight. Should have grabbed his sunglasses. Hauling his hungover ass up to Wellina at the ungodly hour of 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Parched. He grabs an open can from the cup holder of Brad's truck and takes a swig. Some nasty energy drink. With a grunt, he spits out the open window and wipes his mouth with the sleeve of his shirt, then crumples the can and tosses it onto the empty passenger seat. Gotta go deal with what? Brad had blinked, his eyes bleary, when Cameron asked to borrow his ride. He'd crashed on Brad and Elizabeth's couch after playing last night's epic moth sausage experimental metal show at Dell's Saloon. A clematis, Cameron had said. From his Aunt Jean's panicked phone call, it seemed her douchebag landlord was up her ass about her vines again. Last time, it had ended with the landlord threatening to evict her over that vine. What the hell is a clematis? A half grin spread over Brad's face. Sounds kinda dirty. It's a plant, you idiot. Cameron hadn't bothered to add that it was a flowering and vining perennial, a member of the buttercup family. Native to China and Japan, brought to Western Europe in the Victorian era, and prized for its ability to climb trellises. Why does he remember shit like this? If only he could cleanse his brain of the useless knowledge clogging it up. Gaining speed after turning onto the highway that runs out to Aunt Jean's trailer park, Cameron rolls down all the windows and lights a cigarette, which he never does anymore, only when he feels like garbage. And this morning, he feels like hot, steaming garbage. Smoke trails out the window and vanishes over the flat, dusty farmlands of the Merced Valley. Daisies bob in the breeze of Aunt Jean's garden. She's also got some huge bush full of white flowers, a twinkle-light veil-like thing, and this water fountain that he knows runs on 6 DD batteries because she asks him to help her change them. It seems like every time he comes over. And frogs. There are frogs everywhere. Little cement frog statues with moss growing in the cracks, frog flower pots. A Stars and Stripes wind sock waving from a rusty metal hook, featuring 3 grinning frogs decked out in patriotic red, white, and blue. Seasonal frogs. If the Wellina Mobile Park had a prize for best yard, Aunt Jean would definitely be gunning for it. And winning. But the odd thing about her immaculate yard is its utter contrast with the disaster Cameron knows lies inside the trailer. The porch steps creak under his work boots. A piece of paper juts out from the handle of the screen door. He lifts the edge to peek. A flyer for the Wellina Mobile Park Bingo Championship. He crumples it and stuffs it in his pocket. There's no way Aunt Jean goes to those ridiculous things. This whole place is so awful. Even the name, Wellina. It means welcome in Hawaiian. Sure as shit, this is not Hawaii. He's about to jab the doorbell, which is frog-shaped, of course, when shouting spills out from behind the trailer. If that old troll, Sissy Baker, would mind her business, no one would have these absurd ideas now, would they? Aunt Jean's voice drips with menace, and Cameron can picture her standing there in her favorite gray sweatshirt, hands on her barrel-like hips, scowling. He can't help but smile as he strides around the side of the trailer. Jean, please, try to understand. Landlord's voice is low, patronizing. Jimmy Delmonico. A first-class douchebag for sure. The other residents are upset at the prospect of snakes. Surely you get that. Ain't no snakes in there. And hooray you to tell me what to do with my bush. There are rules, Jean. Cameron trots into the backyard. Delmonico is glaring at Aunt Jean, who is indeed wearing that gray sweatshirt. Red-faced, she holds up a clutch of the dense, waxy vines that cover the trellis attached to the back of her trailer. Her cane, with its faded green tennis ball jammed on the tip, rests against the siding. Cammy, Aunt Jean is the only person on the planet who's allowed to call him that. He jogs over, then smiles as she wraps him in a quick hug. She smells like stale coffee, as usual. Then he turns to Delmonico, stone-faced, and says, "What's the issue here?" Aunt Jean snatches her cane and points it accusingly at the landlord. "Cammy, tell him there's no snakes in my clematis." He He's trying to make me rip it down. All because Sissy Baker said she saw something. Everyone knows that old Bat can't hardly see. You heard her. No snakes in there, Cameron says firmly, tilting his head at the mass of vines, which have grown thick and lush since his last visit. How long has it been? A month. Delmonico pinches the bridge of his nose. Nice to see you again too, Cameron. Pleasure's all mine. Look, this is straight out of the Wellina Mobile Park bylaws, Delmonico says with a sigh. When a resident makes a complaint, I'm required to undertake an investigation. And Mrs. Baker said she saw a snake. Said she saw, right in that there plant, yellow eyes blinking at her. Cameron scoffs. She's obviously lying. Obviously, Aunt Jean echoes, but she casts him a puzzled look from the corner of her eye. Oh, really? Delmonico folds his arms. Mrs. Baker has been a member of this community for years. Sissy Baker's packed full of more shit than a turd burger. Cammy, Aunt Jean swats his arm, reproaching his language, which is rich, from the woman who taught him A is for asshole while he was learning the alphabet. Excuse me, Delmonico dips his glasses. Snakes can't blink. Cameron rolls his eyes. They can't. They don't have eyelids. Look it up. The landlord opens his mouth, then snaps it shut. Case closed. No snakes. Cameron folds his arms, which are at least twice the diameter of Delmonico's. Bicep day's been lit at the gym lately. Delmonico does actually look like he'd prefer to leave. Studying his shoes, he grumbles. If that's even true, the snake eyelid thing, there are ordinances. Blame the county for that if you want. But when someone reports that one of my properties has a pest infestation, I told you no snakes. Aunt Jean throws her hands up. Her cane lands on the grass. You heard my nephew. No eyelids. You know what it is. Sissy Baker's jealous of my garden. Now, Jean. Delmonico holds up a hand. Everyone knows you have a lovely garden. Sissy Baker's a liar and blind to boot. Be that as it may, there are safety codes. If something creates a hazardous situation, Cameron takes a step toward him. I don't think anyone wants a hazardous situation. It's a bluff, mostly. Cameron hates fighting. But Shrimp on a Stick here doesn't need to know that. Looking almost comically startled, Delmonico pats his pocket, then makes a show of pulling out his phone. Hey, sorry. Need to take this. Cameron snickers. The old fake phone call. This guy sucks. Just trim it back a little, okay, Jean? He yells over his shoulder as he crunches down the gravel walkway toward the road. It takes Cameron the better part of an hour to prune the clematis, fielding Aunt Jean's picky instructions while balanced on a stepladder. A little more there. No, not so much. Trim down the left. I meant right. No, I meant left. Down below, Aunt Jean collects the snipped-off stems and purple flowers in a yard waste bag. Is that thing about the snakes true, Cammy? Sure it is. He climbs down the ladder. Aunt Jean frowns. So, for real, no snakes in my clematis, right? Cameron glances at her sidelong as he strips off his gloves. Have you seen a snake in your clematis? No. Well, there's your answer. Aunt Jean grins, opening her back door, shoving aside a stack of newspapers with the tip of her cane. Stay and visit, hun. Do you want coffee? Tea? Whiskey? Whiskey? Seriously. It's not even 10 in the morning. Cameron's stomach lurches at the thought of booze. He ducks under the door frame and blinks, adjusting to the low light inside, letting out a breath of relief at the state of the place. It's bad, of course, but no worse than last time. For a while, the junk seemed to be breeding with itself like a bunch of horny rabbits. Plain coffee, then, she says with a wink. You're getting old, Cammy. No fun these days. He grumbles something about having too much fun last night, and Aunt Jean nods in her slightly amused way. Clearly, she can tell he's riding the struggle bus this morning. Maybe he really is getting old. 30 is a bitch so far. She shuffles the mess of boxes and papers on her tiny kitchen counter in search of her coffee maker. Cameron picks up the paperback sitting on top of a pile of junk that has nearly buried her rickety little desk. An ancient desktop computer humming somewhere beneath the heap. The book is a romance, one of those ones with a shirtless, muscled guy on the front. He tosses it back down, causing a stack of piled-up crap to cascade to the carpet. When did she get like this? The collecting, as she calls it. She was never like this when he was growing up. Sometimes Cameron passes through their old neighborhood back in Modesto, the 2-bedroom house where she raised him. That house was always clean. A few years back, she sold it to help pay off the medical bills from the summer before. Turns out, getting knocked out in the parking lot of Dell's Saloon costs a fortune, and it wasn't even Aunt Jean's fault. Some asshole guys from out of town were making trouble, and she was just trying to get everyone to simmer down. Somehow, she took a punch to the side of her head and ended up flat on the pavement. A bad concussion, a shattered hip, months of physical and occupational therapy. Cameron had ditched a decent job with a restoration company, one that could have led to an apprenticeship, to care for her, sleeping on her couch so she'd remember her meds, and driving her to and from the brain injury specialist in Stockton. Every afternoon, he met the mailman on the porch, opening the door quietly so she wouldn't notice. His pathetic savings account held off the collectors for a little while. When Aunt Jean finally sold the house, she had just turned 52, the age requirement for Wellina residents. For reasons that still baffle Cameron, instead of getting a regular apartment or something, she decided to use the small amount of cash left over to buy this trailer and move out here. Was that when the collecting started? Is this dump of a trailer park causing it? Still railing about how Sissy Baker has had it out for her since the misunderstanding at the Wellina potluck last summer, Cameron doesn't ask or details. She sets down 2 steaming mugs on the coffee table and motions for him to sit next to her on the sofa. So how's work been? Cameron shrugs. You got canned again, didn't you? He doesn't answer. Aunt Jean's eyes narrow. Cammy, you know I pulled strings down at the county office to get you on that project. Aunt Jean still works part-time at the reception desk at the county office. She's been there for years. Of course, she knows everyone. And yeah, the project was a big one. An office park on the outskirts of town. Still didn't matter. 10 measly minutes late on his second day, and the asshole foreman told him to pack it. Was it Cameron's fault the foreman had 0 capacity for empathy? It's not like I asked you to pull any strings, he mutters, then explains what happened. So you screwed up, royally. Now what? Cameron's mouth twists into a pout. Aunt Jean is supposed to be on his side. A loaded silence sits between them she takes a sip of coffee. Her mug is covered in dancing cartoon frogs with bright red lettering. Who let the frogs out? He shakes his head and tries to change the subject. I like your new flag, the one outside. Do you? Her face brightens the tiniest bit. I got it from one of those catalogs. Mail order. Cameron nods, not surprised. How's Katie? She asks. Katie's fine, Cameron says, his voice breezy. Actually, he hasn't seen his girlfriend since he kissed her goodbye when she left for work yesterday morning. She was supposed to come see Moth Sausage play, but apparently she was too tired to come out. Then he ended up staying out later than planned and crashing at Brad's. But of course, she's fine. Katie's the type of girl who's never in trouble, always fine. She's a good catch for you. Yeah, she's great. I just want you to be happy. I'm happy. And it would be nice if you could hang on to a job for more than 2 days. Great, this again. Cameron scowls, rubbing a hand across his face. His eyeballs are pounding. He should probably drink some water. You're so smart, Cammy. So damn smart. He rises from the couch and stares out the window. After a long second, he says, They don't just hand out paychecks for being smart, you know. Well, for you, they should. She pats the space next to her on the couch, and Cameron sinks down, dropping his throbbing head onto her shoulder. He loves Aunt Jean, of course he does, but she doesn't get it. No one in the family knows where Cameron got his smarts. And by family, he means him and Aunt Jean. That's his whole family. He can barely remember his mother's face. He was 9 years old when Aunt Jean picked him up from his mother's apartment after she'd told him to pack his bag to stay with his aunt for the weekend. In itself, this wasn't unusual. He often stayed overnight there. But this time, his mother never came to retrieve him. He remembers her giving him a hug goodbye, tears running inky trails of makeup down her face. He recalls, with clarity, that her arms felt bony. The weekend turned into a week, then a month, then a year. Somewhere in her cluttered curio cabinet, Aunt Jean has these little ceramic tchotchkes his mother collected as a child, shaped like hearts, stars, animals. Some of them are engraved with her name, Daphne Ann Cassmore. Every so often, Aunt Jean asks him if he'd like to have them, and every time he says no. Why would he want her old crap when she couldn't get herself clean long enough to be his mother? At least Cameron knows who he inherited the disaster gene from. Aunt Jean applied for sole custody with the courts, which was granted without contest. Much better this way. He remembers the caseworker saying in a low voice, for Cameron to be with family rather than entering the system. A decade older than Daphne, Aunt Jean never married or had children of her own. She always called Cameron the blessing she never expected to have. With Aunt Jean, his childhood was good. She was never exactly like the mothers of his friends. Who could forget the Halloween she showed up for his grade school parade in a homemade Marge Simpson costume, the year he went as Bart? But somehow it worked. In school, Cameron did well enough. He met Elizabeth there, then Brad. Surprisingly well-adjusted, he overheard people say sometimes, for a kid in his shoes. As for his father, it's possible that's where Cameron got his smarts. Anything could be possible when it comes to his father. Neither he nor Aunt Jean has any idea who his father is. When Cameron was a kid, before he understood how baby-making worked, and the necessity of, at a minimum, a sperm donor. He used to believe he simply didn't have one. Knowing the crowd your mom ran with, he was probably someone you're better off without, Aunt Jean always says when the subject comes up. But Cameron has always doubted that. He's sure his mother was clean when he was born. He's seen the photos, her hair in soft brown curls as she pushes him on a baby swing at the park. The using, the problems, Cameron is sure came because of him. Aunt Jean starts to get up. More coffee, hun. You sit, I'll get it, he says, shaking the headache off. He picks his way across the clutter toward the kitchen. As he's pouring 2 fresh cups, Aunt Jean calls from the sofa. Say, how's Elizabeth Burnett doing? She's due at the end of the summer, right? I ran into her mama at the gas station a few days ago, but we didn't have much chance to chat. Yeah, she's about to pop. But she's good. She and Brad, they're both good. Creamer swirls in white streaks as Cameron pours it into his coffee. She was always such a sweet girl. I never got why she chose Brad over you. Aunt Jean, Cameron groans. He must have explained 1,000,000 times it was never like that with Elizabeth. Well, I'm just saying. Cameron, Brad, and Elizabeth were best friends growing up, the 3 musketeers. Now, somehow, the other 2 are married and having a baby. It's not lost on Cameron that the tot's going to take his place as Brad and Elizabeth's third wheel. Speaking of which, I should bounce. Brad needs his truck back by lunchtime. Oh, one thing before you go. With effort, Aunt Jean uses her cane to lever herself up from the sofa. Cameron tries to help, but she waves him away. For what seems like a decade, she jostles around the clutter in the other room. Meanwhile, he can't resist poking through a stack of papers on the table. Old electric bill paid, thankfully. A page torn from TV Guide, they still publish that. And a hunk of discharge papers from the Minute Clinic at the drugstore in town. A prescription form stapled to the top page. Damn, personal shit. But before he can bury the script, he sees something that makes his cheeks burn white-hot. This can't be right. Aunt Jean, chlamydia. Her cane thumps toward the living room. Cameron tries to shove everything back, but to his horror, the whole stack topples, leaving him holding the script. He dangles it from the tips of his fingers, as if the paper itself might be infected. A stationary transmitted disease. Oh, that, she shrugs, nonchalant. It's going around the park. Cameron feels his insides lurch. He swallows and says, well, this shit is no joke, Aunt Jean. Glad you got treated. Of course I did. And maybe start using, protection. Is he really having this conversation? Well, I'm Team Rubber, but Wally Perkins, he won't. Stop. Sorry I asked, she chuckles. Serves you right for snooping. Point taken. Anyway, this. With her slipper, she nudges a box Cameron hadn't noticed at her feet. Some things of your mother's. Thought you might want them. Cameron stands. No thanks, he says, without a second look at the box. Day 1302 of my captivity. My current weight is 6 pounds. I am a big boy. As always, my examination began with the bucket. Dr. Santiago removed the top of my tank and lifted the large yellow bucket until it was flush with the rim. It contained 7 scallops. Dr. Santiago prodded my mantle over the tank's edge with her net, but needlessly. For fresh scallops, I would have entered willingly. The anesthesia seeped sweetly through my skin. My limbs stilled, my eyes closed. My first encounter with the bucket was long ago. Day 33 of my captivity. Back then, I found the sensation alarming, but I have grown to enjoy the bucket. With the bucket comes a sensation of total nothingness, which, in most ways, is more pleasant than the everythingness. My arms dragged on the concrete as Dr. Santiago carried me to the table. She folded me into a pile on the plastic scale. She gasped, "Whoa, big boy." "How much?" Terry said, poking me with his large brown hands that always taste of mackerel. "Up 3 pounds from last month," Dr. Santiago answered. "Has his diet changed?" "Not that I know of, but I can double-check," Terry said. "Please do. This sort of gain is abnormal, to say the least." What can I say? I am a special guy, after all. June gloom. There's a new boy bagging at Shopway tonight. Tova flattens her lips as he puts her strawberry and marmalade jams side by side in the grocery bag. They clink ominously as he jostles in the rest. Coffee beans, green grapes, frozen peas, a bear-shaped bottle of honey, and a box of tissues. They're the soft, lotiony kind, the expensive kind. Tova began buying them for Will when he was in the hospital, where the tissues were sandpaper. Now she finds herself too accustomed to them to switch to the more affordable brand. "I'll hardly need to see that, love," Ethan Mack says as Tova presents her loyalty card. The cashier is a chatty fellow with a heavy Scottish accent who also happens to be the store's owner. He raps a calloused knuckle against his wizened temple and grins. "Got it all up here. Had your number punched in no sooner than you came through the door." "Thank you, Ethan. Anytime." He hands her a receipt and flashes his slightly crooked but kind grin. Tova scans it to make sure the jams rung through with the promotion properly applied. There they are. Buy one, get one half price. She ought not to have doubted. Ethan runs a tight ship. The Shopway has improved since he moved to town and bought the place a few years back. Won't be long before he has the new boy trained in proper bagging technique. She tucks the receipt into her pocketbook. Some June in it. Ethan leans back and crosses his arms over his belly. It's past 10 in the evening. The checkout lanes are empty, and the new boy has retreated to the bench next to the deli counter. "It's been drizzly," Tova agrees. "You know me, love. I'm like a big duck. Rolls off my back. But I'll be damned if I haven't forgotten what the sun looks like." "Yes, well." Ethan smooths piles of receipts into neat white bricks, his eyes lingering on the circular sucker mark on her wrist, a purplish bruise which has hardly faded in the days since the octopus grabbed her there. He clears his throat. "Tova, I'm sorry to hear about your brother's passing." Tova lowers her head but says nothing. He continues, "You need anything at all, just say the word." She meets his eyes. She's known Ethan for years, and the man doesn't go out of his way to avoid scuttlebutt. Tova has never met a 60-something-year-old man who so enjoys gossip, so he's surely aware of the estrangement between her and her brother. Tone measured, she says. Lars and I weren't close. Had she and Lars ever been close? Tova is certain they were once. As children, certainly. As young adults, mostly. Lars stood alongside Will, both in gray suits, at Tova and Will's wedding. At the reception, Lars gave a lovely speech that made everyone's eyes mist over, even their stoic fathers. For years afterward, Tova and Will spent every New Year's Eve at Lars's house in Ballard, eating rice pudding and clinking flutes at midnight, while little Eric slept under a crocheted blanket on the Davenport. But things started to change after Eric died. Once in a while, one of the nitwits probes Tova, asking what happened between her and Lars, and Tova says nothing really, and this is the truth. It happened gradually. No blowout argument, no fist-shaking or hollering. One New Year's Eve, Lars phoned Tova and informed her that he and Denise had other plans. Denise, his wife, for a time anyway. When they would come for dinner, Denise was fond of loitering around the kitchen sink, while Tova was up to her elbows in suds, insisting that she was there if Tova ever needed to talk. Well, it's not a crime for her to care about you, even if you don't know her well, is what Lars said when Tova registered her annoyance. After that fizzled New Year's, there was a skipped Easter luncheon, a canceled birthday party, a Christmas gathering that never made it past the we should get together state of planning. The years stretched into decades, turning siblings to strangers. Ethan fiddles with the small silver key dangling from the drawer of the cash register. His voice is soft when he says, "Still, family is family." He grimaces, lowering his awkward frame into the swivel chair next to the register. Tova happens to know the chair helps his bad back. Not the sort of gossip she seeks out, of course, but sometimes one can't help but overhear. The nitwits like to natter on about such things. Tova sighs. Family is family. She knows Ethan means well, but what a ridiculous saying. Of course family is family. What else could it be? Lars was her last living relation. Family, even though she hadn't spoken to him in years. "I must get going," she finally replies. "My feet are quite sore from work." Your aquarium gig." Ethan sounds thankful for the change in subject. "Say hello to the scallops for me." Tova nods gravely. "I will tell them hello. Let 'em know they're livin' the high life compared to their cousins over there, in the seafood case." Ethan ticks his head toward the fresh seafood department at the back of the store, the one that, with a few local catch exceptions, offers mostly previously frozen seafood. He leans his elbows on the checkout counter with a bemused look in his eyes. Tova's cheeks flush, having picked up on his facetiousness an instant too late. Those scallops in the cold case, rounds of translucent white. At least Sol Bay is too provincial to support a grocery store that sells octopus. She heaves up her grocery bag. Predictably, its contents list toward one end, and the jam jars clink again. Sometimes there is simply a correct way to do things. With a pointed glance at the new bagging fellow, who is slumped on the deli bench now, jabbing at his phone, Tova sets the bag down and moves the marmalade to the other side of the grapes, the way it ought to have been done in the first place. Ethan follows her gaze. Then he stands and barks. "Tanner, what happened to stocking the dairy case?" The kid stuffs his phone in his pocket and stalks off toward the back of the store. Tova hides a smile at how satisfied Ethan looks with himself when he notices He runs a hand over his short, wiry beard, which is mostly white these days, but clings to a reddish hint. Soon, he'll let it grow in anticipation of the holidays. Ethan Mack plays a very convincing Scots Santa Claus. Every Saturday in December, he'll sit in a chair in the community center in a polyester costume, taking photos with the town's children and occasionally a small dog or two. Janice brings Rollo to visit Santa every year. Kids need a little direction now and then, Ethan says. Then again, I suppose we all do. I suppose so. Tova picks up her grocery sack again and turns toward the door. If you need anything at all, thank you, Ethan. I appreciate it. Drive safe now, love, he calls as the chime dings. At home, Tova unties her sneakers and turns on the television to Channel 4. The 11 o'clock news is only tolerable on Channel 4. Craig Morno and Carla Ketchum and meteorologist Joan Jennison. Channel 7 is tabloid nonsense. And who can stand to watch that blowhard Foster Wallace on Channel 13? Channel 4 is the only sane option. The show's jingle drifts into the kitchen, where Tova unloads her groceries. She hadn't bought much. Her refrigerator is already stuffed with casseroles, left on her porch over the last few days by the nitwits and other well-wishers intending to comfort her over Lars's death. Oh, for heaven's sake, she says, bending down and rustling around her jammed fridge, trying to finagle a space for her grapes around an oversized pan of ham and cheese gratin Marianne dropped off yesterday. A scratching sound startles her. She stands upright. It's coming from the porch. Another casserole. And at this hour, she makes her way past the den, where the television is blaring a commercial for life insurance. The front door is still open from her carrying in the groceries, so she squints through the screen door, expecting to see an offering on the doormat, but it's empty. And no car in the driveway either. The door creaks as she opens it. Hello, more scratching. A raccoon, a rat. Who's there? A pair of yellow eyes. Then a reproachful meow. Tova lets out a breath she hadn't meant to hold. Stray cats roam the neighborhood, but she's never seen this gray one, now sitting on her porch step like a king on his throne. The cat blinks, glaring up at her. Well, she frowns, flapping a hand. Shoo, the cat tilts its head. I said shoo, the cat yawns. Tova plants her hands on her hips, and the cat saunters over and winds its narrow body between her feet. She can feel each tine of its rib cage against her ankle bone. She clucks her tongue. Well, I have ham gratin. Would that suit you? The cat's purr has a high-pitched tinge to it. Desperate. All right, then. But if I catch you using my flower beds as a litter box. She slips back through the door, leaving Cat, as Tova decides it should be called, peering through the screen. After returning with a loaded plate, she sits and watches from the porch swing as Cat devours cold ham, cheese, and potato. When Tova returns the dish to Mary Ann later, she won't mention who consumed it. Shame to see it go to waste, so I'm glad to share, she confides to Cat. And she means this. How much food do her friends think she can possibly eat? Tova sets a mental reminder to collect Cat's dish in the morning and goes back inside, closing the door behind her. From the den drifts the sound of the news, which has returned from a commercial break. Well, Carla, I know I'm ready for some summer weather here in Seattle. Craig Morno chuckles. I'm more than ready, Craig. Carla Ketchum's laugh is watery. Next, she'll lean her forearm on the desk and beam at the camera before turning to her co-anchor. She'll be wearing blue, as she seems to believe it flatters her best. And because it rained today, her blonde hair will be wavy instead of tamed into a bob. Of course, Tova can't see any of this from the kitchen, but she's certain. We'll see what Joan has to say about that. After the break, now the camera will pan back to Craig Morno. His tone will rise a smidgen when he says Joan's name. This began a few weeks ago, presumably when he and the weather lady began having relations. Tova doesn't stay to hear the forecast, doesn't need to it'll be cloudy and drizzly. More June gloom, chasing a lass, though he could do with a spot of sun lately. Ethan Mack doesn't mind foggy nights. Halos gather around the streetlights. A fairy horn bellows somewhere in the broom. Midnight chill seeps down his collar as he sits on the bench in front of the shopway, puffing his pipe. Strictly speaking, this is not permitted. Per the handbook, shopway employees must clock out for smoke breaks. Of course, Ethan himself is the one who wrote that handbook, although even so, he tries not to lift himself above the rules. But he and Tanner are the only ones here, and the kid is in the back, none the wiser. Watching Tova go into the night always prickles his nerves. According to his police scanner, there are always lunatics on the roads at night. Why must she do her shopping so late? It's been almost 2 years since she started coming late in the evening, since Ethan started pressing his flannel collar before his shift, trying to make himself a bit tidier, make himself seem more presentable. He pulls the pipe's warmth into his chest, then exhales. The smoke melts into the fog. The fog reminds Ethan of home, Kilberry, on the Sound of Jura in western Scotland. Still home, though he's lived in the United States 40 years. 40 years since he packed a duffel and quit his post as a docker in Kennecraig. 40 years since he chased a lass. It had fizzled with Cindy. The plan was rubbish to begin with, shacking up with a holiday-making American, pissing his savings on a ticket from Heathrow to JFK. He still remembers how the aisles grew smaller and smaller through the little oval window. Tanner pokes his muttonish head out the door. If he registers Ethan's rule breaking, he doesn't show it. The lad's not the brightest bulb, he says. Did you want me to do the entire cold case? Of course. What do you think I'm paying you for? Tanner grumbles as he slinks back inside. Ethan shakes his head. Kids these days. New York City was gritty in the 70s, and before long, Ethan and Cindy had bigger plans. Cindy emptied her flat in Brooklyn to buy an old Volkswagen van, which they drove across the country, and its vastness blew Ethan's mind. Pennsylvania, Indiana, Nebraska, Nevada. Any one of them could have contained Scotland entirely. When they found the sea again, Ethan was relieved. They lingered on the coast of Northern California for weeks, making love in the shadows of giant redwoods, before working their way north along the Pacific Coast Highway. In a ramshackle chapel somewhere near the Oregon border, he and Cindy tied the knot. Weeks later, in Aberdeen, Washington, the van's transmission finally failed. Ethan tinkered with it, but it was gone, And in the morning, so was Cindy. And that was that. Aberdeen suited Ethan. He had never visited its namesake town on the northern coast of Scotland, but it felt familiar. Low, grey skies, gruff, industrious people. He took a job as a longshoreman, found a bed in a rooming house, took his tea early in the morning while watching the fog drift over the ship masts. The union treated him well, retiring him with a modest pension at the age of 55. Out of grudging necessity, he moved inland, closer to the city, to the physical therapists needed to reshape his back after years of hoisting logs onto boats. But retirement made him restless. Shopway had a swing shift to fill, was happy to furnish an ergonomic chair at his register. He did them one better and gathered up his savings and bought the place. Now, 10 years later, he still doesn't need the money, not exactly. The union pension covers rent, food, gas for his truck. But the trickle of profit from the store affords him new vinyl records for his collection and a nice bottle of scotch now and then. Proper Isla whiskey, not Highlands rubbish. Headlights flash on the slick pavement as a car swerves into the parking lot. Ethan snuffs his pipe and ducks back through the front door. He posts up at the register as a young man and woman stagger in, arms so deeply entwined that they move like a single person. They ping-pong down the aisles, giggling as they ricochet off the pillars of chips and soda. They fumble with a debit card at the register. They peel out onto the road, washing the front windows in white light as they go. Idiots. They'll kill someone. Someone like Ethan's sister, Mariah, who was struck by a truck when she was barely 10. Fishermen on their way back from the pub. The world is full of idiots. The thought of Tova's hatchback out there on that road makes Ethan queasy. He wishes he could drive by her house and make sure her car is parked there. Maybe her lights would be on. But no. He broke himself once, chasing a lass. Day 1306 of my captivity. I am very good at keeping secrets. You might say I have no choice. Whom might I tell? My options are scant. To the extent I am able to communicate with the other prisoners, those dull conversations are rarely worth the effort. Blunt minds, rudimentary neural systems. They are wired for survival, and perhaps expert at that function. But no other creature here possesses intelligence like mine. It is lonely. Perhaps it would be less so if I had someone with whom to share my secrets. Secrets are everywhere. Some humans are crammed full of them. How do they not explode? It seems to be a hallmark of the human species, abysmal communication skills. Not that any other species are much better, mind you, but even a herring can tell which way the school it belongs to is turning and follow accordingly. Why can humans not use their millions of words to simply tell one another what they desire? The sea, too, is very good at keeping secrets. One in particular, from the bottom of the sea, I carry with me still. Baby vipers are especially deadly. The box sits on Cameron's kitchen counter, untouched, for 3 days. Aunt Jean had schlepped it out of the trailer herself. Toss it if you want, but at least look through it first, she'd said. Family's important. Cameron had rolled his eyes. Family. But when that woman truly wants her way, arguing is pointless. so the box traveled home with him. Now, Cameron eyes it from the sofa, considering turning off Sports Center to take a look. Might be something in there he could take down to the pawn shop. Katie will need his half of July's rent soon. Maybe after lunch. The microwave hums and rotates his noodle cup while he waits, cooking by magnet blasting radiation, causing food molecules to beat the shit out of each other. Who comes up with this stuff figures out how to market it. Whoever that guy is, he's probably swimming naked in a pile of cash somewhere, surrounded by supermodels. Life is unfair. Ding. Cameron removes the steaming cup. He's carrying it back to the sofa, careful not to let it slosh, when the apartment door creaks open, startling him. Shit, scalding liquid spills over his hand. Cam, are you okay? Katie drops her work bag and runs over. I'm fine, he mutters. What's she doing home on a Tuesday afternoon? Then again, she might ask him the same question. His mind spins. Had he told her he was working today? Had she asked? Hang on, she says, ducking into the kitchen, her perfect little butt twitching under her gray skirt. Katie works at the front desk of the Holiday Inn by the freeway. Good thing she's been working day shift lately. He would have been busted by now if she were still on nights. She hurries back, carrying 2 damp rags. Thanks, Cameron says, as she hands him one. Its coolness is welcome relief on his hand. Then she squats down to wipe up the spilled broth with the other. So you're home early, he says, bending to help, forcing his voice to be casual. I've got a dentist appointment this afternoon. Remember, we talked about it last week. Oh yeah, right, Cameron nods, vaguely recalling. I don't remember you mentioning you were off today. She plucks a stray noodle from the carpet and drops it into her rag, looking up at him through narrow eyes. Yeah, I'm off today. He doesn't add, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the one after. Weird they'd give you a day off. It's only your 3rd week. It's a holiday, actually. Shit, why did he say that? She stands. A holiday. Yeah, it's a slippery lie. International Contractors' Day. Everyone gets the day off. Really, what is he going to tell her? The truth? He just needs time. A few days to land a new job. Then it'll be all good. International Contractors' Day. Yep, everyone gets the day off. Everyone. Bizarre they're still working on the roof next door then, isn't it? Cameron opens his mouth, but the bang-bang of a nail gun echoes from the rooftop of the next building over, cutting him off. Katie's face is cold, blank. You got fired again. I mean, technically, what happened? Well, I was. When were you going to tell me? She interrupts. I'm trying to tell you now, if you'll give me a chance. You know what? Never mind. She picks up her work bag and stomps toward the door. I don't have time for this. I'm late for my appointment, and I'm done giving chances. Chances. If life kept a tally of chances, Cameron would be owed big time. What would Katie know about having an addict parent? What would Katie know about this gnawing hatred inside him that never goes away? Katie, with her parents who bought her a car when she graduated high school. Katie, with her tight gray skirt and straight white teeth, which right now are being polished by some needle-dick dentist. They'll give her a free toothbrush on the way out. She'll toss it, still wrapped, in the bathroom drawer, because she uses some fancy electric toothbrush anyway. He's stretched out on the couch, watching some low-budget action movie, when she finally returns. It occurs to him that it's been a while. Hours and hours. It's nearly dark outside now. Way longer than a dentist appointment should take. Not that he'd actually know. He hasn't been to a dentist in years. Maybe Katie had a bunch of cavities or something. A root canal. Aunt Jean had a root canal last year and complained about the pain for a week. The thought of perfect Katie getting poked in the mouth with a pointy drill is vaguely satisfying, and this makes him feel like a jerk. "Hey," he calls, then pauses, waiting for her lamenting sigh, the one meaning she's still pissed, but less so. He'll say he's sorry and she'll frown, but she won't really mean it. Then he'll put his hand on her leg, and she'll lean into him, and they'll lie here cuddling while they finish watching this dumb movie before retiring to bed for some solid post-argument sex. But she doesn't respond. Instead, she heads straight for the bedroom. He half smiles. Straight to it. Then he hears the first thunk. What the? He has to investigate. As he walks in, Cameron watches his work boot sail over the edge of the moonlit balcony, landing below on the tiny square of crusty grass. Thunk. Its mate hits the walkway, then bounces a couple of times over the weedy cracks, laces dragging behind. "Katie, can't we talk?" She doesn't answer. "Look, I'm sorry. I should have told you." Again, no response. Whiz. A ball cap grazes his ear as it sails by. His favorite Niners cap. Enough. Yeah, he should have told her he got canned. But could they just talk about it for a hot second before she throws out everything he owns? "Katie," he says slowly. Like she's some wild animal, he reaches out and puts a tentative hand on her shoulder. "Don't," Katie mutters, twisting away. She yanks a pair of his boxers from the bureau and wads them in her fist, then hurls them toward the balcony door. But the throw is too soft. The underwear unfurls and flops to the floor. He bends to pick it up. "Can we just talk? I can't do this anymore, Cam." For the first time since she left for the dentist this afternoon, she meets his gaze. Her eyes blaze, like the bonfires they used to build in the shadow of his Jeep when they'd go camping out in the high desert. But those days are long gone. The repo guys snagged the Jeep months ago. Cameron was going to call the bank to make their so-called payment arrangement. He swears he was about to do it. But no, they just sent those assholes in and hauled it away. No second chance. Yet another deduction from his chance tally. "I swear I was going to tell you, and it wasn't my fault." "Sure, it wasn't your fault. Never is it?" No, the relief that washes over him at her sudden empathy is short-lived. Of course she's being sarcastic. His cheeks burn. "I mean, it's complicated." Of course she's kicking him out. Cameron would probably kick himself out too. Katie closes her eyes. "Cameron, it isn't complicated. I'm going to put this to you as simply as possible, so your juvenile brain can understand. This is over. But I've got rent covered," he insists, thoughts veering back to Aunt Jean's mystery box. Desperation tinges his voice. He trails Katie from the bedroom into the kitchen, still clutching his boxers. "This isn't about rent. It's about your inability to be an honest human being." She picks up the mystery box from the counter and starts back toward the bedroom, toward the balcony. To his surprise, his gut clenches. "I'll take that." "Fine, whatever, just get out." She drops the box and it lands with a heavy thump on the carpet, Her face has changed, the fire in her eyes vanished. She looks tired. You mean right now? Cameron snorts. She can't be serious. No, next Saturday. I threw your stuff outside for the hell of it. She rolls her eyes. Yes, of course, right now. Where am I supposed to go? Not my problem. She lets out a hollow laugh. Not that I care, but someday you're gonna have to grow up, you know. The box makes a reasonably comfortable seat. It's better than the curb anyway, in the dark, and with his stuff heaped next to him, Cameron waits for Brad to pick him up. And waits, for an hour. Of all the times to not have a car. Finally, headlights sweep around the corner. What the hell happened? Brad slams his truck door as he gets out. What the hell yourself? What took you so long? Well, let's see. How about I was asleep? Because it's almost 11 on a Tuesday night. Brad starts chucking Cameron's stuff into the truck bed. Some of us have to work tomorrow, you know. Hey, fuck you. Brad's face melts into a grin. Too soon, sorry. Whatever. Can we just go? As Cameron hoists a trash bag full of clothes, he glances up at the balcony, where Katie still has the patio door open and the bedroom light on, no doubt watching the curbside scene unfold. He throws one last glance toward the apartment before nestling his guitar case atop the pile and flipping the tailgate up. It creaks loudly, then closes with a metallic bang. Come on, Brad says, unlocking the passenger door. Get in. Thanks, Cameron mutters, hopping onto the seat with the box on his lap. Brad and Elizabeth's house is on the outskirts of town, where subdivisions pop up overnight like a bad rash. Unnecessary plaster columns and fake brick facades and 4-car garages. Bougie as shit. Elizabeth's parents gave them a huge chunk of money for the down payment a few years ago after their wedding. Must be nice. But Cameron doesn't complain about any of these things on the 15-minute drive there from his apartment. His old apartment. It's Katie's apartment now. Her name alone is on the lease. When he first moved in, she was constantly on his case about calling the landlord to be officially added because Katie always follows the rules. But after a while, she let it drop. Maybe she saw this coming. It's in the box, Brad asks, interrupting his thoughts. Baby vipers, Cameron deadpans, not missing a beat. Dozens of them. I hope Elizabeth likes snakes. Half an hour later, Brad slides a coaster across the coffee table before he hands Cameron a sweating pint glass, as Cameron finishes explaining what happened. Maybe she'll get over it, Brad says, yawning. Just give her a couple of days. Cameron looks up. She threw my shit on the lawn, like something from some dumb chick flick movie. Every damn thing I own. Brad glances at the pile in the corner. That's really everything you own. I mean, not literally, but you know. Cameron frowns. What about his Xbox, still parked in the cabinet under Katie's TV? He'd skirted overdraft fees to buy that thing when it first came out. But it might as well be Katie's now. Like hell is he going back there to beg for it? Maybe those couple of bags and one dubious box really are all he owns now. Cameron's eyes fix on Brad's oversized bay window when he continues. We can't all live in a McMansion, you know. It was meant as a joke, but the words spray out like acid. He attempts to soften his tone. I mean, I've just been embracing my minimalist side. Brad raises an eyebrow, stares at Cameron for a long moment, then raises his pint. Well, here's to new beginnings. Thanks for letting me crash again. I owe you one. Cameron clinks, and lager sloshes over the rim, dribbling on the table. Seemingly out of thin air, Brad comes up with a paper towel, then leans over to dab the spill. You owe me like 10. I charge extra for checking in after midnight. Brad grins, but his eyes are serious. And I know I don't need to tell you this again, but you'll owe me new furniture if you mess anything up. Cameron nods. He got the same speech last week when he crashed on the couch after the bar. Elizabeth just got new living room furniture, and apparently its utilization for normal living room activities, like sitting and lounging, is a sensitive subject. He used to sleep in the guest room when he crashed here, but it's been remodeled for the baby now. Just last month, Cameron patched the drywall in the closet for payment in pizza, after Brad tore it up trying to install some ridiculous shelving system. Cameron could patch drywall in his sleep, and in fact, he did one time, or half asleep anyway, or so the foreman of that job site claimed before sacking Cameron on the spot. And seriously, Cam, Brad continues, 2 nights tops, 10-4. So where are you gonna go? Brad folds the beer-dampened paper towel and places it neatly on the edge of the table. Cameron props a sneaker over his knee and twists a fraying shoelace around his finger. Maybe one of those new apartments downtown, Brad sighs. Cam, what? I got a buddy who worked that job. He says they're nice inside. Cameron pictures himself settling into a wide leather sofa, digging his bare toes into brand new carpet. He'll need a flat screen, of course, 80 inches at least. He'll mount it to the wall and run the cords behind so they don't show. Brad leans forward, lacing his hands. There's no way in hell they're going to rent one of those to you. Why not? Dude, you have no job. Not true. I'm between projects right now. Are you ever not between projects? The construction industry is cyclical. Cameron straightens up, a bite creeping into his voice. What would Brad know about actual physical work? He spends all day faffing around some dumpy little office, shuffling papers for the local electric utility. Brad used to talk about leaving, going to San Francisco or something. But he'll never leave now, and Cameron knows why. His parents are here, Elizabeth's too, and now all 4 of them are about to be grandparents. The whole clan gets together for dinner on Sunday nights, probably eats honey-glazed ham or some shit. Why would they ever leave? Cameron wonders if there's some sort of special tether children of normal families are granted. One for which he's never been eligible. Cam, what's your credit score? Cameron hesitates. Truth is, he has no clue. Hell would freeze before he'd check. When he got the Jeep a few years back, it was in the low 600s, but that was several questionable life choices ago. With a sarcastic smirk, he answers, 120. Brad shakes his head. Maybe that's your bowling score. Sure as hell's not your credit score. Well, what can I say? I'm awesome at bowling. Obviously. Cameron runs his fingers over the little series of punctures in the side of his sneaker. Probably from Katie's dog, a teacup something or other with a taste for footwear, his in particular. The dog is such a pain in the ass. Katie sent it to live with her parents, but they brought it over every time they visited. At least he won't have to deal with that garbage anymore. Why don't you go back to school? Brad suggests. Not for the first time. Get your associate's degree or something. Cameron grunts. Brad should be smart enough to realize college costs money Cameron doesn't have. But suddenly, Cameron does have an idea. A good one. You know that apartment over Dell's? Brad nods. All the regulars at their watering hole know about the place upstairs. They joke sometimes that old Al, the bartender, could make a killing renting it out by the hour. The other night, I heard old Al say it's empty, Cameron continues. Maybe he'd rent it to me. He might make you settle your tab first, but maybe. I'll ask him when we're there for our gig next week. Brad clears his throat. Next week? Fine, I'll go over tomorrow. Good, Brad says. Then he looks down. By the way, there's something I need to tell you. I wanted to wait until everyone was together. But what? Cameron frowns. Just spill it. Our moth sausage show next week. It'll be my last. What? Cameron feels like someone kicked him in the chest. Yeah, I'm quitting the band. Brad grimaces. With the baby coming, Elizabeth and I think it's best if you're the lead singer, Cameron blurts. You can't quit. Sorry. Brad looks like he's shrinking in his chair. Can you not tell the guys yet? I really wanted to wait until everyone was together. Cameron stands and stalks over to the window. It's just that with the baby, things will be different, Brad goes on. Cameron glares at Brad and Elizabeth's front yard, its glowing landscape lights, the golf course grass, the brick walkway. To his horror, a lump forms in his throat. Of course Brad would leave moth sausage when the baby came. He should have seen it coming. I get it, he says finally. I'll still come to the shows. Cameron swallows a scoff. There won't be any moth sausage shows without Brad. Elizabeth, too. Maybe we can bring the baby. Brad lets out a long sigh. I really am sorry. It's cool. Cameron returns to the sofa and starts removing the decorative pillows, making a point to stack them extra neatly. It's late. I should sleep. Yeah, okay. Brad hovers for an extra moment before picking up their empty glasses. Hang on, you need sheets, he says before disappearing down the hallway. Sheets for a couch. Since when, a minute later, Brad reappears with an unopened package of bedsheets, which he tosses at Cameron. They're purple and white striped, and Cameron would bet anything Elizabeth picked them out. Purple has always been her favorite color. Brad is still hovering like a goddamn mosquito. Need a hand setting up. Nope. Cameron flashes a tight smile. Night. Okay. Night. From the kitchen, Brad calls back. Don't let those baby vipers out. Cameron doesn't answer. Day 1307 of my captivity. Humans have few redeeming qualities, but their fingerprints are miniature works of art. I am well read in fingerprints. I suppose you could say it is one fortunate side effect of dealing with humans all day long. Their trembling boogers and damp armpits, their sticky palms reeking of floral lotion and popsicle residue. But when the doors lock for the night and the lights dim, they leave behind a stunning, intricate mural on the glass at the front of my tank. Sometimes I spend quite some time staring at them, studying. Little oval masterpieces. I visually trace the grooves from the outside into the center, then back out to the edge again. Each one unique. I remember all of them. Fingerprints are like keys, with their specific shape. I remember all keys, too, Muckle teeth, Mrs. Sullivan. Tova opens her trunk, preparing to start her shift, when a short man waving a manila envelope comes jogging across the Solbay Aquarium's parking lot, weaving around the typical handful of cars belonging to the evening fishermen and the day's last joggers. Recognizable Solbay vehicles, most of them. Somehow, Tova hadn't even noticed the unfamiliar gray sedan from which this fellow just burst forth. Tova Sullivan, he hollers again, approaching. She slams the hatchback shut. May I help you? Glad I finally found you, he says, panting. As he catches his breath, he flashes a smile too large for his face, with oversized white teeth. They remind Tova of the bleached barnacles that cling to seaweed-strewn boulders down at the Sound's edge. He continues, You're not an easy lady to track down, you know. I beg your pardon. Your address had my GPS going in circles, and your home phone just rings, no voicemail. Thought I was going to need a private investigator. Warmth creeps up Tova's neck at the suggestion that she might have allowed her answering machine to remain full, exacerbated by the fact that the accusation is basically true. But her voice is even when she says, an investigator. It happens more often than you'd think. He shakes his head, then extends his hand. Bruce LaRue, I'm an attorney for the estate of Lars Lindgren. How do you do? First of all, please let me say, I'm sorry for your loss. His tone doesn't sound particularly sorry. We were not close, Tova explains. Again, right. I won't take up too much of your time then, but I needed to get this to you. He thrusts the envelope at Tova. Your brother had some personal assets, as you probably know. Mr. LaRue, I have no knowledge of what my brother did or did not have. She slides a finger under the seal on the envelope and peeks inside. It's a document, a list of some sort, on Charter Village letterhead. Well, now you know. We'll need to get together at some point to sort out the monetary assets. But for now, that's a list of his belongings. Just a few personal items. I see. Tova tucks the envelope under her arm. You can give them a call and let them know when you'll swing by to pick everything up. Swing by. Charter Village is all the way up in Bellingham. That's an hour away. LaRue shrugs. Look, go get the stuff, or don't. They'll get rid of it after some time if no one shows up. If no one shows up. To Tova's knowledge, Lars never remarried after he and Denise split, but she's always supposed he must have had a sweetheart or two. A close friend, at least. Isn't that part of the reason people move to those homes? For the social scene. But this LaRue fellow seems to be implying that no one had shown up for Lars. Had ever shown up for him, maybe. Had he died in the company of some bored nurse? An aide counting the hours until shift's end. I will go, she says quietly. Great. Then my work here is done, for now. I'll be in touch. LaRue flashes his grin again. Any questions? A great many questions swirl in Tova's mind, but the one that tumbles out is, how exactly did you find me here? Ah, a very friendly cashier up at that grocery store on the hill. I stopped in for a coffee, having failed to find you at your home address, and when we got to chatting, he mentioned you'd be down here. Nice guy. Talks with a heavy accent, like a leprechaun. Tova sighs. Ethan. By some serendipity, the aquarium is in decent shape tonight. No dried chewing gum to battle. Nothing sticky in the trash cans. No unspeakable bathroom messes. And thankfully, everyone seems to be in their proper tank. I see you back there. The glass front of the octopus exhibit is smattered with greasy fingerprints, which Tova sprays and erases with her rag, while the creature stares at her from one of the upper corners. She's now accustomed to finding his exhibit empty, seeing him instead with the sea cucumbers next door, which seem to be his preferred snack. Tova can't say she approves, but it makes her smile. Their secret. He unfurls his arms and floats toward the front glass, never breaking his gaze. Not hungry tonight, are we? He blinks. An hour. On the freeway, she mutters, leaning closer to scrub at a stubborn spot on the glass. I don't care for driving on the freeway, you know. In his slow, almost prehistoric way, the octopus attaches an arm to the inside of the tank and draws his body closer. His suckers look bluish-purple tonight, clinging to the glass. She wrings her rag. And I don't care for those homes either. Retirement homes, nursing homes. All the same, aren't they? Always smell like sick people. Eye gleaming like some otherworldly marble, the octopus follows her every move as she folds the rag and tucks it away. Tova leans on the cart. Lars always left messes, and now he's left one last thing for me to clean up, even after he's died. His life was always a bit disorganized. Mind you, that wasn't why we stopped speaking. No, that wasn't the reason. She tuts at herself. What is she doing, talking to this octopus? Not that she doesn't always say hello to the creatures here, as fond of them as she is, but this is different. This is talking. But good heavens, if it doesn't feel like the creature is actually listening. Of all the impossible things, and anyway, there was no reason. Nothing, really. Well, good night, sir. Tova gives the octopus a polite nod, then moves along. At the seahorse exhibit, there's a handwritten sign taped to the glass. Tova recognizes Terry's scrawl. Mating. Give them space. Oh, Tova clasps a hand to her chest, peering cautiously around the paper. Is it that time again? Last year, Terry threw a little baby shower for the entire staff, all 8 of them, when the seahorses spawned. Mackenzie had stayed after her admissions shift to blow up balloons and paint a banner that read "Giddy up, little cowboys." Dr. Santiago, the veterinarian, had dropped by with a cake that read, in cursive icing, "Hip hip hooray for hippocampus babies." Generally, Tova avoids parties, but that cake had drawn intrigue. During Eric's sophomore year, he made a poster board project for honors biology on the hippocampus of the human brain. He devoted a whole panel to the etymology of the term, its derivation from ancient Greek, its shared meaning with the scientific term for the seahorse genus, and its mythological connection to sea monsters. Maybe we all have sea monsters living in our brains, Eric joked as he pasted chunks of paper onto the poster board on their dining room table. Anyway, if Terry and Mackenzie had planned to repeat the gesture this year, it would be well underway. Tova hasn't heard of it, although she's sure they'd never exclude her. Not intentionally. If a celebration does happen, she supposes she'll see the mess afterward. It's absurd anyway. That's what the nitwits said last year when she told them of it. Perhaps she's the only person on Earth who thinks hippocampus babies are more exciting than human ones. Ethan is wiping down the Shopway register when she enters. He beams at her. Tova. The shopping baskets sit in a neat pile next to the newspaper stand, but Tova marches right past them, past the short row of nested carts, directly to the register. She's not here to shop. Good evening, Ethan. His face starts to flush. Within moments, it's nearly as red as his beard. I have just had a visitor at my place of employment. Do you know anything about that? I, the bloke with the muckle teeth. Ethan folds his rag and tucks it in his apron pocket, looking sheepish. I wouldn't have told him if he hadn't said it was important. Your brother's estate and all. Tova clucks her tongue. Estate, is that what he told you? Well, yeah. Who wouldn't want an estate? Tova sighs. Is there any local drama into which Ethan is not champing at the bit to insert himself? Stiffly, she continues. Apparently, my brother left some personal effects in the nursing home where he died. Nothing worthwhile, I'm certain, but now I must go retrieve them. Ethan looks genuinely contrite, regret clouding his wide green eyes. Bloody hell, Tova, I'm sorry. It's at least an hour's drive. Aye, bit of a haul, he says, picking at a callus on his thumb. Tova inspects her sneakers. She is not in the habit of asking for help, but Ethan had seemed genuine in his offer, and the thought of 2 hours on the freeway makes her uneasy. I should like to take you up on your offer. Offer? Ethan looks up, his voice a touch brighter. Yes. If I need anything at all, you said. Well, there is something. Anything, love. What do you need? Tova swallows hard. A ride to Bellingham. Day 1308 of my captivity. The seahorses are at it again. The humans display shock and excitement, as though this were a surprise. I assure you, it is not. The seahorses spawn at the same time every year. I have witnessed 4 of their breeding cycles during my captivity here. There will be hundreds of seahorse larvae. Thousands, perhaps. They begin as a cloud of eggs, and over several days, transform into a clump of wiggling limbs, bearing no resemblance to their parents. In fact, they look like small versions of the sea worms that prowl the sands of the main tank. It is fascinating how a freshly born creature can be so unlike its creator. Obviously, this is not the case with humans. I have observed humans at every life stage, and they are, at all times, undeniably human. Even though the human baby is helpless and must be carried by its parent, no one could mistake it for anything else. Humans grow from small to large, and then sometimes recede again as they approach the end of their lifespan. But they always have 4 limbs, 20 digits, 2 eyes on the front of their heads. Their dependence upon their parents is unusually prolonged. Certainly, it makes sense that the smallest children require assistance with the most basic of tasks: eating, drinking, urinating, defecating. Their short stature and clumsy limbs make these activities difficult. But as they gain physical independence, oddly, their struggle continues. They summon mother or father at the slightest need. An untied shoelace, a sealed juice box, a minor conflict with another child. Young humans would fail abysmally in the sea. I do not know how a giant Pacific octopus spawns. How might my larva look? Are we shapeshifters like seahorses, or humdrum like humans? I suppose I shall never know. Tomorrow, there will be crowds. Terry may even allow the main doors to stay open late to accommodate additional humans who wish to see the seahorses spawn. These rule benders will scurry past my tank, most of them uninterested in anything else. Every so often, one will pause here. With these, I always play a game. I unfurl my arms and let them waft in the artificial current of the pump. One by one, I sucker my tentacles to the glass, and the human draws nearer. Then I pull my mantle to the front of the tank and stare into its eyes. The human calls its companions to come look. As soon as I hear their footsteps around the bend, I jet back behind my rock, leaving nothing but a whoosh of water. How predictable you humans are, with one exception. The elderly female who mops the floors does not play my games. Instead, she speaks to me. We converse. Happy endings. For the umpteenth time, Ethan's thoughts circle back to the nitwits. Any of those ladies could have given Tova a lift to Bellingham. Surely they're aware of her reluctance to drive on the freeway. But she asked him. This morning, he awoke an hour early so he'd have time to shower and trim up his beard, get himself sharp and tidy. Everyone knows how much Tova likes things neat and clean. Because he was up at the crack of dawn, he consumed an extra mug of tea. And maybe that's why he can't stop his fingers from thrumming on the steering wheel like he's jamming on a piano. Are you all right? Tova asks again from the passenger seat. She drops her crossword pencil onto the newspaper resting on her lap and brushes a speck of lint from the upholstered seat. He should have hauled his arse out of bed at 5 this morning instead of 6. Then he would have had time to tidy up his truck as well as himself. I'm all right. Why do you ask? A pretty smile spreads over her face. Honeybee hands. Honeybee what? Honeybee hands, you know, busy. That's what I used to say when Eric couldn't keep his fingers still. Startled at the mention of that name, Ethan takes a deep breath and wulls the jitters out of his limbs. Honeybee hands. Clever. In his mind, he assembles an explanation about too much caffeine this morning. But when he glances over a moment later, she's reabsorbed in her puzzle, tapping the eraser on her chin as she studies the fold of newspaper. Scrap that one, then. He scans for any of the other conversation starters he'd spent half the night rehearsing, but he somehow comes up blank. The only topics that surface are off-limits. Dead brother, dead husband, dead son. Sheesh. Still in shock, she brought Eric up a moment ago, but clearly that moment has passed. Instead, what comes out is, "What's that you're working on?" Which is a ridiculous question. Anyone can see it's a crossword. She frowns. Yesterday's puzzle. I'm afraid I've fallen behind. Behind, he chuckles. You mean you do that thing every day? Of course. It's the daily crossword. I complete it daily. And if you miss a day, you catch up. Her pencil scratches as she fills in a set of boxes. Naturally. The Charter Village Long-Term Care Center is tucked into a series of rolling green hills sliced through by a long, winding driveway. As they motor through the campus, smaller parkways splinter off the main one, each with a signpost: Memory Center, Tennis Complex, Acute Care, Clubhouse. This place has it all. Finally, a signpost points toward reception, and Ethan leans on the accelerator. He lets out a low whistle as he pulls around the circular drive, past a pair of maroon brick columns dressed in ivy. Downright posh. It looks like a fancy prep school or university, not a wretched place where old folks come to play tennis before eventually withering away. This is it, love. Face is stone. Yes, it seems so. Ethan cuts the ignition and gives her a puzzled look. You've never been here before. I have not. He resists the urge to unleash another low whistle. Tova had said Lars lived here for a decade. Had she really not visited even once? She gathers her purse, tucking the newspaper inside. Shall we? Ethan scrambles out and hurries around the truck, hoping to reach the passenger side in time to open her door for her. But by the time he gets there, she's already striding toward the stately building. For the first half hour, Ethan waits in the reception area, and the minutes drag. The leather chairs are remarkably plush, but the reading material is absolute shit. National Geographic, AARP the magazine, and a handful of dry Wall Street rags. Couldn't they spring for something halfway interesting, like Rolling Stone or even People? Celebrity gossip has always been Ethan's guilty pleasure. His honeybee hands come back, drumming impatiently on the low coffee table. He rises and inspects the refreshment table in the corner of the lobby, which inexplicably offers coffee, but not tea. All of this leather and ivy, and they can't even furnish a spot of Earl Grey. What rubbish. What rubbish. He plucks a disposable cup from the stack and pours a cup of decaf anyway, because it's free. He doesn't particularly enjoy coffee. When Ethan was 19, he worked for a stint at the Kiddie Zoo down in Glasgow, shoveling the elephant pen. Once, as a joke, two of the other blokes that worked there collected feces and ran it through a juice press. What came out looked remarkably like coffee. Never been the same since. Coffee hasn't. When Tova had whisked off toward the inside of the facility, he insisted she take her time going through her brother's things. But now he realizes he has no context for how long such an activity might take. Will he be waiting here all day? He should have brought a book. From the front desk, there's a gaggle of voices. Some folks assembling for a tour of the facility, looks like. The woman leading the group, wearing a gray suit and a sleek amber ponytail, addresses the small cluster in a clear, confident voice. Welcome to Charter Village, where happy endings are our specialty. Ethan nearly spits out his coffee. Happy endings. Who came up with that one? Gray suit frowns at him. Sir, Ethan wipes dribbled coffee from his chin with his sleeve. Are you joining us? Me. He looks over his shoulder, as if there might be another sir behind him. Then he shrugs. Sure, why not? Something to pass the time anyway. This way, then. With a polite smile, she motions him toward the group. Ethan must admit it. The residents do seem happy. Maybe that ridiculous slogan isn't off base. There's a billiard room, a cafeteria with a mile-long buffet, even a pool and jacuzzi. Residents can get room service, and the beds are made up daily with 600 thread count sheets. By the time the tour starts to wrap up, Ethan finds himself half convinced to move in, as if he could afford it. His union pension wouldn't go far in a place like this. When a Tova surfaces an hour later clutching a box, Ethan springs from the plush reception leather chair. All right then, love. Certainly. Tova looks so little in her purple cardigan, and the box makes her frame seem even more slight. This time, he beats her to the car door. Chivalrously, he opens it and steps aside for her to enter, for which she thanks him politely. Then he takes the box and finds a space for it behind the passenger seat. But there's something else, too. A glossy page with an image of the community center and tennis courts. Some bloke with a full head of silver hair and white shorts swinging a racket. As Tova is fiddling with her seat belt, he steals a longer peek. It's not just a slick brochure. It's a whole packet. A sleek Charter Village folder with that terrible motto: "We specialize in happy endings." There's one page not neatly aligned in the folder. An application.